Have you ever made a mistake in life? A mistake so big that you felt everything was finished? Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you failed an exam. Or maybe you lost a friend. In that moment, it feels like the end of the road. You feel small. You feel weak. You feel alone. But what if I tell you life is not always about first chances? Sometimes life is about second chances. This is the story of Tom. Tom was an ordinary man, just like you, just like me. He had a normal life, a job, and dreams. But one mistake took everything away. He thought it was over. He thought he could never stand again. But then something changed. A simple smile, a kind word, and a little hope gave him the courage to start again. And what happened next might surprise you. So stay with me. Listen carefully, because this is not just Tom's story. This could be your story too. The story of falling down and rising again. Welcome to A Story of Second Chances. Part 1. The Fall. Tom was a young man in his 20s. He was not rich, and he was not famous, but his life was simple and happy. He had a job in a small office. Every morning he wore a clean shirt, took the bus, and went to work. His boss liked him because he was smart and friendly. His coworkers liked him because he always smiled and helped them. After work, Tom often met his friends. They went to the park, drank tea at a small shop, or played football on weekends. Life was not perfect, but it felt good. Tom believed his future was bright. But then, slowly, things began to change. Tom started waking up late. Sometimes he stayed up at night watching TV or playing games on his phone. "I'll wake up early tomorrow," he told himself. But tomorrow came, and he was late again. At first, his boss forgave him. "Tom, you're a good worker, but please be on time," the boss said. Tom nodded, but he didn't change. Days turned into weeks, and soon being late became his habit. One morning, Tom arrived 1 full hour late. His boss looked angry. "Tom," he said firmly, "this cannot continue. I gave you many chances, but today is your last day." Tom's heart sank. His job was gone. At first, he thought his friends would support him, but slowly their calls stopped. When they met, they laughed and talked about their jobs, their plans, their busy lives. Tom stayed quiet. He felt different now, like he didn't belong. Every night he lay in bed and thought, "How did I lose everything so quickly? Why couldn't I wake up on time? Why was I so careless?" The questions played in his head again and again. He looked at his phone. No new messages. He looked at his wallet. No money coming in. He looked at himself in the mirror. His smile was gone. Tom felt like a failure. And when you feel like a failure, the world feels heavy. Every step is hard. Every day feels the same. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like Tom? Have you ever made a mistake and then watched it grow bigger and bigger until you lost something important? Maybe it was a job. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was trust. In those moments, it feels like the end of the story. But for Tom, the story was only beginning. Part 2. The Dark Days. After Tom lost his job, his life changed in ways he never imagined. The first morning felt strange. He woke up late, the sun already high in the sky. There was no alarm, no bus to catch, no office waiting for him. At first, he thought, maybe this is a little break. Maybe I can rest for some time. But days turned into weeks, and the little break became a long, dark season. Tom stopped waking up early. Some days he stayed in bed until noon. His phone sat silent on the table. No calls, no messages. His friends were busy with their jobs, their families, their own lives. And Tom? He had nowhere to go. He started spending his time in front of the TV. Morning, afternoon, night, it didn't matter. The bright colors and loud sounds filled the silence of his small room. He ordered fast food because cooking felt like too much work. Pizza boxes, empty soda cans, and snack wrappers piled up on his desk. Sometimes, when he passed a mirror, he looked away quickly. He didn't like the tired face staring back at him. His hair grew messy, his clothes stayed the same, and his once bright eyes looked empty. He thought, "This is not me. What happened to me?" On the street outside, people walked fast. They wore clean clothes, carried bags, and talked about meetings and plans. Tom watched from his window and felt like he lived in another world. Their lives were moving forward. His life was stuck. At night, the silence grew heavier. Lying in bed, he asked himself the same painful questions. Why didn't I try harder? Why didn't I change when I had the chance? Why did I lose everything? He wanted to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying his mistakes, the alarm clock, the angry boss, the empty chair in the office, again and again, like a movie he didn't want to watch. Some nights tears rolled down his face. He wiped them quickly, even though no one was watching. He felt ashamed, weak, and invisible. Maybe you have felt this too, those days when you don't want to get out of bed, when food has no taste, when laughter feels far away. Maybe you know the feeling of being stuck, like the world is moving, but you are standing still. Tom thought his story was over. He believed he had no second chance. The pain was real, and the days were dark. But life has a strange way of surprising us. Sometimes in the middle of the darkest night, a small light appears. And for Tom, that small light was coming soon. Part 3. The Small Spark. One cold morning, Tom was walking slowly to the corner shop. His head was down, his hands deep in his pockets. He had no job, no plans, and no energy. He only went out because he needed bread and milk. As he walked past the old houses on his street, he heard a warm voice. "Tom, is that you?" He looked up. It was Mrs. Lee, his old neighbor. She was standing at her garden gate, holding a basket of flowers. Her hair was gray, and her eyes were gentle. She hadn't seen Tom for many months. "Tom," she said with a smile, "I haven't seen you in such a long time. How are you, dear?" For a moment, Tom didn't know what to say. Nobody had asked him that question in weeks. He forced a small smile and said, "I'm okay." But Mrs. Lee looked at him carefully. "You don't look okay," she said kindly. "Remember, Tom, even bad days don't last forever. You're young. You still have time." Her words were simple, but they touched his heart. As he walked home with his bread and milk, he kept hearing her voice. Even bad days don't last forever. You still have time. That night, Tom lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His room was messy, his life was broken, but something inside him felt different. Maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't finished yet. He thought about his old job, his friends, and the life he once had. He whispered to himself, Maybe I can try again. Maybe I can change. For the first time in many months, Tom set his alarm clock. He placed it beside his bed and said softly, "Tomorrow I will wake up early." The next morning, the alarm rang at 7 a.m. At first, Tom wanted to ignore it. His body felt heavy, and his mind said, "Go back to sleep." But then he remembered Mrs. Lee's kind eyes and her words. Slowly, he pushed himself out of bed. He stood by the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky with soft colors of orange and pink. The air was fresh. For a moment, he just breathed deeply and felt alive. It was a small step, only one morning, only one choice, but it felt powerful. Tom smiled a little and said, "This feels strange, but good." Sometimes in life, we wait for big changes, big miracles, but often it begins with something small, a kind word, a simple choice, a little spark. For Tom, that spark was enough to light a tiny fire in his heart, and that tiny fire was about to grow. Part 4. The Climb Back. The next morning, Tom woke up early again. His alarm rang, and although it was hard, he pushed himself out of bed. He opened the window and let the cool air touch his face. For the first time in months, he felt a little proud. He looked around his room. Clothes were on the chair, papers on the floor, and empty boxes on the table. "This is not a home," he thought. So he began to clean. He folded his clothes, threw away the trash, and wiped the dust from his desk. It took a long time, but when he finished, the room looked brighter. It was a small victory, but it gave him energy. The next day, he went for a walk. At first, his legs felt heavy, but step by step, he kept moving. He saw children laughing in the park, old men playing chess, and women buying vegetables at the market. The world was alive, and he was part of it again. For the first time in a long time, he smiled. Then came the hardest step, his career. Tom sat down with his old laptop and opened his resume. The words looked old, like they belonged to another person. His fingers shook a little, but he began to type. He wrote about his skills, his experience, and his goals. When he finished, he whispered, "This is me. I can do this again." He started applying for jobs. Click after click, he sent his resume to different companies. Days passed, then weeks. Some companies never replied. Others sent emails with one painful word: rejected. Each rejection felt heavy, like a stone in his chest. Some nights he wanted to give up, but then he remembered Mrs. Lee's words, "Even bad days don't last forever." So he kept trying. One more application, one more chance. Slowly, Tom began to change. His mornings were no longer empty. He had a purpose. He was moving, learning, fighting. Each small action gave him a little more confidence. Then, one afternoon, as Tom sat at his desk, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. His heart beat faster. He picked up the call. "Hello? Is this Tom?" he asked nervously. "Yes, this is Tom." "We're from Greenfield Company. We received your application. We would like to invite you for an interview." Tom froze. For a moment, he couldn't believe his ears. An interview. A real chance. His second chance. He thanked the caller and put the phone down. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were full of hope. He whispered to himself, "This is it. This is my chance. I won't waste it." Part 5. The Second Chance. The day of the interview finally came. Tom woke up early, dressed carefully, and looked at himself in the mirror. His shirt was clean, his hair was neat, but his heart was beating fast. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm. You can do this. On the bus ride to the company, Tom's mind was full of questions. What if I fail? What if they say no? What if they see me as a loser? His hands felt sweaty and his stomach was tight. But then he remembered Mrs. Lee's words. Even bad days don't last forever. You still have time. He took a deep breath and decided to believe in those words. When he arrived, the company building looked big and serious. Tom walked in trying to stay confident. He sat in the waiting room with other candidates. Some looked calm, others looked nervous. Tom felt both at the same time. Finally, his name was called. "Tom, please come in." He entered the office. The manager, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked at him and said, "Welcome, Tom. Please sit down." The interview began with simple questions: his skills, his experience, his goals. Tom answered as best as he could, but he also decided to be honest. He said quietly, "I want to tell you something. I made mistakes in my past job. I was careless and I lost my position, but I learned from that pain. I don't want to waste this chance. I want to prove myself again. I just need a second chance." The room was silent for a moment. Tom's heart was racing. He thought the manager might say no, but instead the man smiled gently. "Tom," he said, "everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you learn from them, and I can see that you have." He paused, then added, "Congratulations, you are hired." Tom's eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak, but his voice shook. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for believing in me." When he walked out of the building, the sun felt brighter, the air fresher. He stood on the street, closed his eyes, and smiled. He whispered to himself, "This is it, my second chance, and I will not waste it." That night, Tom sat by his window looking at the stars. His journey had been painful. He had fallen, he had lost, he had cried. But he had also stood up, step by step, and found hope again. And maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you have fallen before. Maybe you are still on the ground right now. But remember Tom's story, because second chances are real. And if Tom could rise again, maybe you can too.